Introduce Jennifer Hashley from the National Farm Incubator Training Initiative. So Jennifer, if you want to take it away.
Great, thank you so much. I'm going to share my slides, and I have a lot of dense information packed in these slides, which you'll get a copy of, I'm sure, in the follow-up. So if any of you want to go back through and read the text or remind yourself of what I'm saying, just want to make sure that you don't have to feel like you have to absorb everything in this one session. So just let me know when that is shared properly. Can everyone see that okay?
Yes.
Perfect. All right, great. So we'll get started. So here's the agenda that I wanted to cover today. I'm going to give you a brief introduction to the Field Network, which is an acronym which I'll share. We'll do a quick Incubator 101, talk about some program design and components, some examples of programs across the country, some best practices or lessons learned as you're thinking about potentially starting an incubator program, and then we'll have lots of time for conversation and questions. So just a little bit of background about why we are running this National Incubator Farm Training Initiative Network. I run the New Entry Sustainable Farming Project. I've been there for 23 years. We started the program in 1998, and we have three core programs: our farmer training programs, which includes our incubator program, but lots of courses and workshops. I'll talk a little bit about us as an example later on in the presentation. And then we run a food hub, which helps aggregate and distribute our farmers' products, which we developed early on in 2005, seeing that a lot of our farmers on the incubator really did need extra support with marketing. And then because we were one of the early programs doing this, lots of people kept calling and asking us to share information about our curriculum and programs. So we ended up developing the National Incubator Farm Training Initiative in 2012 to provide one-on-one technical support and resources and networking events to support other programs getting started across the country. And then in 2016, we added the Ag Apprenticeship Learning Network because so many of the incubators are also affiliated with apprenticeship programs or interested in kind of having that be a pipeline into their incubator program. So New Entry's mission is, to really help train the next generation of beginning farmers and provide healthy food for everybody. So the Field Network, like I said, it's an acronym that stands for Farm Incubation and Experiential Land-Based Skills Development, because in agriculture we love our acronyms. So we merged the NIFTY network and the Ag Apprenticeship Network in 2020. So they're both doing very similar things, providing professional development to land-based training programs. So we have a national map of programs across the country, color-coded by incubator or apprenticeship. We have an online resource library with lots of toolkits, curriculum examples, case studies of projects, farmer manuals for how you organize your site and the rules and requirements. I'll point out a bunch of evaluation resources. We have sample budgets, about 25 different webinars that we've done over the years, and a lot of other great resources. We used to do it every year. Since the pandemic, we've been trying to move toward a biennial, though we're behind because we haven't had staff other than myself working on this. We're overdue for an annual survey. We usually survey programs to kind of identify trends and challenges and collect information so that we can create these infographics to share back with policymakers and funders and others about what are these programs doing, what are challenges, what are their outcomes, what are their results. So if any of those prior infographics are useful to you in your project development, just to get a sense of who's out there and what network you'd become part of, those are available to you there. We also have a listserv. You're welcome to pose any questions as you're getting started with your project. People are very sharing of information and helpful. And we do an annual field school, which is our conference, which I'll have a slide about at the end. And we host monthly networking sessions to bring together practitioners running incubator and apprenticeship programs to discuss topics, challenges, strategic questions, and just to meet each other and share what you're doing so you don't feel so isolated out there running your program. These are some examples of the resources that we have. We're getting ready to hire 2 new staff that are starting in 2 weeks, which I'm very excited about. So one of our first projects will be to update our census, but then to go back through a lot of these resources and do any updating that needs to happen. But so far, people still use them all. We've developed these, they're probably 10 years old now, but they're still, I was just reading through them again last night in preparation for this. Lots of great information in here. So if you have not yet checked out the Incubator Farm Toolkit, really recommend paying attention to all the great wisdom that we put together in there, thinking about how you're going to evaluate your program. We have an evaluation toolkit. If you're thinking about a mentorship program, we have a wonderful toolkit we developed in 2022 about supporting mentors to teach next generation agrarians. There's case studies. We did an incubator evaluation infographic there. So a lot of good resources in the library to check out. So what is incubator? I think, every incubator is unique. There's no one, cookie cutter formula. There's certainly shared approaches and things. So I just wanted to kind of give a little bit of a backdrop. There's lots of ways beginning farmers learn and where they get training, whether they are getting experience growing up on a family farm, maybe they do an internship or apprenticeship, maybe they're taking extension programming, going to a degree program at a university, they're getting a job on a farm, they're taking classes, they're learning stuff on the web through self-directed learning, watching YouTube videos, whatever it is. But where do farmers really get experience starting and launching their own business? And so incubators kind of can play that role in providing a space to learn and grow in a supported environment. So what are these things? They're obviously land-based. Usually they're multi-grower, many people sharing a land and shared infrastructure. Most programs across the country have a beginning farmer training and or technical assistance component to it. And really they're focused on entrepreneurship and training small businesses and helping these folks that have a dream of starting a farm to think like a business. Usually they're time bound, meaning that it's an incubator. That the whole idea of an incubator is you're in the space and then you leave at some point. That's becoming a little more fluid across the country as people programs are struggling of where do their incubators graduate to? How do they find land? How do they invest in the capital needed? Things like that. So some have strict time policies, some do not. And really the idea is to provide these spaces for people to minimize their barriers to entry into farming. And as I said, they're all very unique. And why are they important? Obviously, we all know why we care about having future farmers. We have these aging farmer populations, other people interested in getting into farming, lots of consumer demand. There is a vacuum for successors to take over family farms. Sometimes in certain areas, there's not a lot of extension programming for new farmers, although that's been growing. And it's really tough to get into, finding the land, getting the training that you need, building your markets, having the capital investment. It's very risky. We know climate change is making it even harder. And a lot of communities have sustainability, food security goals. So there are these models popping up around shared use of land and infrastructure and people wanting to farm in community as well. And I'll talk a little bit about the agrarian commons model later. And there's more funding available. The little sidebar here is a survey that the National Young Farmer Coalition has done and trying to identify the biggest challenges for farmers getting into the business. So incubators can be a help in that regard. This is just a chart you can look at later, just trying to kind of weigh what are some of the different components of each of these different ways farmers can get access to training, information, and resources through all these different modalities. And really, oftentimes a farm incubator can check the box across, having access to resources, education, networking, market development, business development, and usually for a fee that is somewhat affordable, depending on how the program is structured. And that's the goal. And so who runs these things? Lots of different entities. So from food banks, conservation districts, colleges and universities, extension, county, state government, refugee resettlement agencies, faith-based groups, nonprofits, and even private landowners. There's all kinds of people who run incubators. They're organized in many different ways across the country. This is just one of the infographics we did many years ago. I'm not going to go through all these statistics, but just to let you know, there's years of infographics of how we track changes of how these programs are developed, who they serve, what's their project size, how many staff members do they have, how are they organized, all these different kinds of metrics if you're curious about kind of the landscape of other incubator programs out there. And then are they successful? I think this is always the thing that, as you're thinking about developing something or collaborating, do they really help beginning farmers succeed? Some of the challenges with answering that question is, as I said, they're all different. So people have different goals for why they start an incubator. Are you trying to do it for economic development, for job training, for food security? You want to, improve your community health and wealth building, environmental sustainability, land use, what really is your why, your mission, and why you're doing the program. And so if this is why you're offering an incubator program, it can be tough to standardize these metrics across programs, training staff and how to measure outputs and outcomes and impact of the program, and which data are we collecting? Is it because the program wants it to improve their program? Is it because the funder has a metric, BFRDP, the Beginning Farmer Rancher Development Program. For a long time, their only metric was you have to create farmer owner operators. Well, incubator programs function as a space kind of in this continuum of people trying it out, figuring it out, learning whether they want to start a business or not. There's not always a lot of funding for a good long-term evaluation. And then how are we measuring over what period of time? Are we trying to figure out, are these programs successful? And there's so many different definitions of success. So I just wanted to point out, we were part of the GREW project, which is called Gaining Results Through Evaluation Work. So as you're thinking about starting your project, I always like to say, let's start with the end in mind. What are the goals? What are the things that you want to achieve? And so we developed a lot of great evaluation resources that are also on our website, linked there and linked here below. What is your definition of farmer success? What are all the things that need to be in place to help farmers succeed? We try to map that out. And we know that, there's all kinds of outcomes that, people that are thinking about farming, aspiring farmers, beginning farmers, they may not all decide to farm. They may join your program and decide it's not right for them. So there are these other outcomes that you can also be claiming as a result of your program. So just trying to visualize that more. There's also a whole booklet that we created. Here are some theories of change, some ways that people can flow through a program, things you might want to measure along the way. So just wanted to make sure you're aware of those resources as you're thinking about program design and development. Because when you think about incubator program design, some of the basic tenets and things are really to define, again, I know I sound like a broken record, but what are your program goals? What are you trying to achieve? What's your mission, vision, and values? What are the outcomes that you want to see for the region, for the farmers, for your organization, your program, the land use, whatever is driving you to start this program, being really clear what those goals are. Because the more you're clear, the more you'll be able to communicate to potential participants what you're trying to achieve, what you hope they will achieve. And that communication underpins everything around an incubator program. And then, once you have your goals, that'll define what kind of resources you need, how much farmland, what kind of infrastructure or enterprises do you want to entertain on the land, what kind of capital connections, training, technical assistance, all the stuff that you want to provide as complementary program aspects. And then, what enterprises will you support? Livestock, flowers, fruit trees, vegetables. Farmers are going to come with lots of different ideas and needs. And then, are you going to help support any of their market access? So is it just a platform for them to farm? What other kind of wraparound support services? Most incubator programs across the country do provide some kind of marketing assistance, because obviously if you don't sell your product, you're not really making much money, or going to be a much viable business for too long if you're not really selling and actively doing that. And as farmers are learning all the things, like say drinking from a fire hose of all the skills and knowledge that they have to do, usually it's one person trying to manage everything. Having that extra marketing support is huge. So will you be facilitating that as a program as well? And then what other kinds of community engagement are you going to be wrapping into this kind of programming, if any? Are you going to be doing other educational events, having volunteers, school groups, tours, interns, shared use of the site, engaging policymakers, change makers in what you're doing? Those are all things to consider as well as you're getting started. So again, starting with the goals, I think again, having the capacity and designing around that. What's in and what's out? What are you doing and what are you not doing? And getting really clear on that as part of your goal setting, and then making sure you have the financial resources to operate the program effectively, to have the right staff in place, to have the right infrastructure, all the administrative processes. And I think this is one of the things that people struggle with a lot, is having the right staff that's qualified to run these kind of programs. You want someone that has a farming experience, that knows how to do all the things, but they also have to be a very relational person, because when you're dealing with multiple people sharing multiple pieces of equipment on the same land, conflict happens. Having good relational skills, cultural competency, facilitation skills, kind of that social worker vibe, helping people with goal setting through the hard times. Farming is tough. So having the right people in place can really make or break a program. And then, like I said, really having good evaluations so you can demonstrate results and keep your program going over time. So thinking about the staffing, like what's who do you need? What do you need? Is this going to be a bare bones incubator? Some incubator programs have literally one staff person or a couple staff people, or some are part of a larger organization, so they have a lot more capacity. I think these are some of the clear roles that should be part of a good functioning incubator. Obviously having the admin piece, you've got to be able to get people, outreach, market your program, get them in the door, manage all the financial pieces of how your funding is structured, all that kind of the admin stuff. And then the farm management piece, who's going to be in charge of making sure all the infrastructure works, building it, maintaining it. Are they going to fix things when they break, which they will? And then are you going to have a training component? Are you going to partner and, contract that out or collaborate? But if you're going to have that in-house, who's in charge of developing the curriculum, doing the trainings, providing the technical assistance? Sometimes that's also the farm manager. Sometimes that's a hard role for somebody to do both things well. And then if you are going to have a marketing component, again, that's a whole other job in and of itself. So those are just a few of the roles and responsibilities that I think are needed to make a successful program. Obviously, then there's the infrastructure, all the stuff, having the land, having the equipment, utilities, storage, and support. And this is where it all gets hard when you're starting out a program. There's lots of things that you're going to need, and then there's lots of things you're going to want, and then how to prioritize that. So obviously, do you have enough land to do the kind of programming that you want to offer? How many incubators do you want? How big is a parcel that makes sense? How are you going to divide it up? Do you need things for other kinds of programming? Is it only going to be an incubator farm? Is there also going to be community gardens, growing for food relief? Incubators do all kinds of things with their land. You're obviously going to need parking. It's very different running a multi-site user farm than having just a one user, one farm. We have, anywhere up to 15 businesses on our site. That can mean 30 different people coming and going in different cars if there's more than one person associated with the business. You might have visitors, volunteers, other folks. Obviously, utilities, water, huge, whether it's irrigating, washing crops, potable water, having storage for all the stuff, not just your stuff as an organization, but the stuff the farmers will accumulate and bring to the site. How is that going to be stored and managed? Obviously, bathrooms, maybe break areas and shelter, and then all the other things, all the other equipment, greenhouses, coolers, wash stations, meeting space, fencing, barns, vehicles, tools. It's endless. Lots of good stuff. And then, how do you put it all together? So once you kind of have your goals in mind, you have your staff, you have some stuff, then really how's the program going to come together? What is the tenure expectation? You've got to decide how long can they stay on the incubator? How many months will they be allowed to operate during the year? When do you open and close? Is it year round? How will you select people? What are the expectations? What are the requirements, the rules, the norms, the practices? What are you doing? What are they doing? And there's lots of examples of farmer manuals. I'm happy to share ours. The link is here. And then what do you do if people are not meeting expectations? So thinking through that, having all that really clear, if someone's violating the norms, they're not showing up, they're not weeding their plot, they're really struggling, how do you engage them before it becomes a challenge for everybody else? In a shared space, that gets really hard. And then what do you charge for folks? What level of subsidy are you going to provide, if any? Are you going to charge market rate? Some programs, start at a very subsidized scale or even free, and then move up over the years on a graduated scale, finally graduating people to market rate. Some people charge a per acre fee or a flat fee. Some charge by the month. Some is annual. Some do a la carte. Some are all inclusive. So there's lots of decision making. Are you providing all the services? Are they doing it themselves? How do you make sure if they're using your infrastructure that they're trained, they're doing it safely? And then are you providing any other custom services? Is it included in the rent? We lay down plastic mulch, we do mowing, we'll till up people's beds, we'll do bed prep, all that stuff for an extra fee. We manage the cover cropping because it's just easier to do it on the tractor than having each individual do it on their own. We do all the fertility applications. We organize a lot of cooperative buying, and then obviously the technical assistance. Are you charging for that? Are you contracting that out? And then how do you find people? Who is the ideal candidate? Getting really clear in your goals of who do you want to serve? What specific groups or needs are you trying to address? What experience do they need? Who can you partner with in the community to get the word out? And are you really clear again on your expectations? And then how are you going to select them? Do you have them complete an application, an interview, a work day? Do you have do they have a business plan? What are your requirements for folks? Do you have a selection committee? Things like that to put together so you can find the right people. And then what kind of training will you offer? Are you just expecting them to come fully trained, fully ready to start their business, and they're not going to need a lot of support? That doesn't always work that well. People always need support. I think farming is so hard. It's so comprehensive. So some kind of training is usually included in these kinds of programs. And most people develop their curriculum around these, major risk areas around production, legal, market, human resource, and financial. So a lot of people offer classroom or field-based training. Who's going to be teaching that? And some people have demonstration plots to show folks what's going on, one-off workshops. Peer learning is huge. There's, if you have multiple farmers, they're definitely going to learn from each other for better or for worse. And, building those leadership skills among farmers to help each other is great. And then just some examples of incubators. Obviously, there's ours in Massachusetts. We've been around for a while. We work with very diverse audiences, from immigrants and refugees with farming backgrounds to career changers to everyone in between. We have 20 acres as certified organic. We have up to 15 businesses a year. We are very strict about our 3-year term, but we have all these educational programs and a food hub and technical assistance. Other folks, just some examples like Viva Farms in Washington. They do bilingual English-Spanish program. They target a lot of farm workers, and they have an urban program. They have about 118 acres across 2 locations, incubating a lot of businesses. And one of the examples I'll give later, they're buying up other properties in the Skagit Valley as these ag parts to kind of graduate their incubators to larger parcels with longer-term leases, but still connected to the program. And then there's lots of examples of urban incubator programs. Our conference in 2023 was in Kansas City, Missouri, and Cultivate KC and the New Roots for Refugees, part of the Catholic Charities program. They've been working with immigrants and refugees, and they have lots of different plots on like 16 acres all over the metro area. They go to lots of different markets, and they are helping their farmers acquire land after their 4-year program. This is kind of our comprehensive pathway. Just these are some examples. I won't go through it all. It's a lot of information, but we do like an explore farming workshop. That's kind of our outreach and recruitment. People kind of have to raise their hand, say, yes, I want to farm. And then we do a crop production course. And now this year we added a new practicum in sustainable ag, because we found that if people really haven't worked on a farm before or haven't like really tended the land, it's really hard for them to just go from saying, yep, I want to be a farmer, into our business planning course onto the incubator. When we were working with immigrants and refugees who had farming backgrounds, like they knew how to farm, they really just needed help with the business and marketing. Now that we have everybody in the world who wants to farm, it's like there are more people that don't really have the production experience needed. So it's important to provide some of that hands-on training. And then our requirement is they have to take our business planning course, develop a business plan, and then they get assigned their incubator. We do lots of trainings on the incubator. We do lots of one-on-one technical support. We provide access to other resources, capital, loans, grants, all that. We help them support with marketing through our food hub. And then we help match them with land as they're transitioning off the incubator. So then that's our goal, is to have successful farmers. So we have our theory of change here. You can look at it later, but we have lots of high touch opportunities. And then as the number of participants decreases, the significance of the impact, the more time we spend with them increases, hopefully to have better outcomes over time. And then we have a little logic model here you can look at, just kind of thinking about how we frame what we want our outputs and outcomes and long-term change making to look like. These are just some other examples from the case studies document that I referred to. We have lots of different case studies of different programs. This is the Farley Center that we're going to be visiting this year at our conference in Madison, Wisconsin. Folks in one of the projects we visited before out in Portland, Oregon, they're organized by the Soil and Water Conservation District. They use a really cool tax structure that helps fund the program. They've got a lot of great infrastructure out there. And so they do a lot of work with Extension and NRCS as an example, but this is kind of a quasi-government agency. And this is another one that's kind of embedded in another organization that focuses on refugees and has a large property that they do lots of different kinds of enterprises, but a small vegetable portion and a CSA and other models there that you can read up on. And so just to kind of end with some lessons and best practices, and then we can go into our discussion. Some of the challenges, I think, of running these kinds of programs, how do you really vet people to know that they're going to be successful candidates for an incubator farm? That's one of the challenges of like getting the people with the right kind of experience who are really going to use this incubator to kind of hone their business development, build their markets, and like kind of be their own business owner, and then kind of launch off as they get more experience over time. And the tragedy of the commons with any shared infrastructure is always tricky to manage. Who manages the fence lines, who keeps the equipment mowed, who pays attention to all the things that the farmers are really just focused on their plot. They're there for potentially a short time. They're not thinking about the overall site management. And so sometimes, when you're borrowing equipment, you don't treat it like your own. Stuff breaks, people put it away broken, and then the next person finds it. It's like these things happen. So developing good systems for that. And then again, with vetting of people, do people really have time? A lot of people can't step away from their full-time jobs to do this. They have other life commitments, and this is starting a whole new business. A lot of times they don't have other labor, so they're doing everything themselves, the growing, the selling, the producing, all of it. And then, does your staff have the right expertise to meet all the different levels of business development? Can they balance the training and technical assistance and the site management and all the people, all the personalities? And then how do you support people on the incubator? And then when you have graduates who are out there, like their needs and challenges don't go away. So I think a lot of programs that are maturing right now are kind of struggling to balance, like, how do I pay attention to all the new people coming in on the incubator? And now my graduates still have these needs kind of in the teenage years of farming. And how do I balance all of that? How do I really build effective partnerships so that I know my graduates are going to do well? And then how do we transition people out of these programs? How do people find affordable, accessible, secure land? And then land is just land. It's not a farm yet. How do they then afford to capitalize all the infrastructure? A lot of them are debt averse, don't know that they can pay it back. There's all these challenges. And then, how are we teaching people to scale up too? I mean, a lot of these incubator programs are really small because people can't step out of their full-time jobs. So they're really learning on a hand scale, a rototiller scale. But if we really want to build long-term food security, how are we teaching tractor training, managing labor, kind of the financial analysis, the enterprise analysis, what legal support do they need? How do they further develop their markets? Like kind of that whole scaling up piece is like sort of next level. Once you get folks started, how do you help keep them going? But I think these are, incubators are great places, for farmers to learn. It's a low risk environment for them to really thrive or to fail safely, as I like to say. That's just as much of a good outcome. You help somebody not invest and go into debt to decide this isn't right for them. They're getting this amazing, consistent coaching, shared learning, connections with each other, building a network of support. If you've kind of got this multi-year curriculum they're going through, they're continually evolving and growing and deepening their business. And then hopefully they're getting some transition support and really continuing to thrive and go out and populate the landscape with these amazing community-oriented farmers. So some of the keys to success of these programs, I think, are to have, really comprehensive programming, to think through all these important pieces around the resources, the education, the marketing, that ongoing technical assistance, and how you're going to provide them with all the things that they need help with, from land and markets and credit and grants and financial analysis, all the pieces that kind of wrap around that. And then, a lot of the programs are just constantly trying to problem solve, being creative, really paying attention to farmer needs on the ground, collaborating, partnering, sharing their success, and really building the leadership of their farmers. And that really helps a lot in the management of these kinds of programs. Other things, again, going back to what really works, is having clear goals from the start, knowing your goals and your audience, be really clear on your value add. What are you offering? How do you define success for yourself, for your program? And how do farmers define success for themselves? And really work to fill the gaps. And you don't have to do everything. Obviously, collaborating and referring to other experts that do these things is huge. And, perfect is the enemy of the good. You don't have to do it all, and you don't have to do it all well, but just being really clear what you are trying to do and really build community around your program. And again, there's no right way, everything's unique. And again, be really clear. What are your policies and procedures? Communication, communication, communication. if you're going to do what you say you're going to do, there's nothing that can derail a program more than to have misaligned expectations. You're not going to have successful outreach if people feel like you don't say what you're going to do well. And so, I'm focusing on, these are businesses. Oftentimes people get into this, they don't get into farming to do QuickBooks and spreadsheets usually. So really helping them understand that they need to operate like a business to stay around in the long term, or maybe this isn't the right program for them. If they don't want to run a business, then there are maybe other ways for them to kind of scratch that itch of farming. But if you're trying to generate viable businesses, that financial planning is key, marketing is key. And don't do things that the farmers can do themselves. Really try to empower them and build the leadership of that. Help them learn how to fix things and manage things and use things properly. And then, I think managing the soil fertility and shared resources is always going to fall on us as programs. And then to think about sustaining the program, it's always a question. How do I keep this program going? I got my first grant, and now what happens when it runs out? Really tracking your outcomes from the very beginning and trying to find diversified funding from the beginning and sharing those success stories, collaborating, partnering, leveraging resources, and policy and advocacy, and tap into the network for help. I think, there's lots of great ideas out there. So new things coming down the pike, or things that have been swirling around out there. Again, what do we do with our graduates? These ag parks, I think, are coming online, the agrarian commons and farmland commons models. Other places where people are kind of thinking about next steps for their incubators. There's a lot more interest in the farmer community around working in collaboration together, whether through cooperatives or collectives or worker-owned groups. And then obviously we all know there's a huge emphasis on climate resilience. So there's a lot of new investment, new opportunities for funding and conservation practices, infrastructure, food security work, local schools, regional infrastructure projects, conservation projects. So taking advantage of all those climate resilience and partnership oriented opportunities for the success of your incubator. And I'm not going to go through this either in detail because we're running out of time, but just wanted to say that there have been some long-term evaluations of incubators. We did one from looking back from 2005 to 2020. And have a little infographic on our site there of how are people doing after the incubator. Alba in California just did a 20-year impact assessment that they published last fall. So this is great to kind of see how they have been tracking their data over time and over 20 years of running an incubator program, what some of their outcomes and impacts were. So I encourage you to look at that report. And get connected to the field network. Just want you to be in touch with us. We're here to help. As I said, I'll have 2 new staff starting in a couple weeks that will have lots more time than I've ever had to help people really think about what's new and program design and provide some support and connections to other programs. Encourage any of you to attend our conference that's happening in October in Madison, Wisconsin. It's a really niche conference of really just practitioners running these kinds of land-based training programs. So a lot of great feedback. Everybody's like, these are my people. This is what it's so amazing to find everybody here that's doing exactly what I'm doing, because sometimes it can feel lonely. So that's what I have. Hopefully we have enough time for Q&A and discussion.
I think Phil has had his hand up for quite some time, and thank you for your patience.
No worries. Thank you. And one of my computers crashed, so I may have missed some of the topics covered, but thank you. Really rich, detailed presentation. Obviously, I have a lot to learn. I'm a relatively new person in the concern about this field. And I think I saw more than a decade's worth of involvement and dedication. So I have a 2-part question. One, I think about 10 years ago, it may be from the American Farmland Trust, there's a statistic that we need 1 million new young farmers in the next decade. I don't know if you have any statistics on how well these incubator programs are meeting that need, or whether there are other avenues. So it's kind of a systems question. Where are the bottlenecks to entry, and what can we do to facilitate those? The second part is that while we are, our food resilience working group is actively pursuing the establishment of 1 or more incubators, it's a lot. The capital, the overhead, the organization, the networking, et cetera. so it demands a lot of commitment, resources, et cetera. At the same time that there are still millions of farms where people can go and apprentice, perhaps as individuals, perhaps as small groups. So the question is, have you looked at other pathways for helping new farmers get the training and entry? And I guess the big question, which you acknowledged, but I'm curious to hear any insights on how do those new farmers then get access to land? Thank
Yeah,
you.
it's a great point. Yeah, this is just one model of many, I would say, but an important one. And I do think, to your point, the whole pipeline development, that has to be a big part of it. And I think we're seeing more of that develop, but we need to accelerate that faster. It's like, how are we exposing young people to careers in agriculture from the very beginning? We've got farm to preschool now. We've got farm to school programs, school gardens at schools, field trips to farms, college programs, community college programs. We need all of that. And then the challenge is we need these apprenticeships and internships, and we need good quality apprenticeships and internships, because sometimes, over the past couple of decades, it was a way to get free labor or cheap labor, and there wasn't a lot of structured learning, skill development, competency assessment, related technical instruction, all the things that should go along with a real apprenticeship in the trades, because all farms are different. It's hard to decide what are those skills, what should they be, how do I teach them, all of those things. So I think we need all those little hammers and all those little points of exposure along this huge funnel. And then at some point, if someone didn't grow up on a farm, doesn't have access to family land, then how do they, if they've come through this funnel, they're really interested, they want to start something. This is really, I think, where the role of the incubator program goes. Unless the landowner is going to say, hey, just go throw some crops in my field and do something. This is a more structured environment where people are coming into a program that has support, it has the infrastructure, it allows them to start their business on a small scale, put those skills to use, try it out, be the manager in charge of all the decision making of their business, and then decide, is this really right for me? Now, am I ready to consider taking over somebody else's farm? Do I think I have the management skills, the marketing skills, the business savvy to do it? Because it's really hard to go from this idea to just being like, I'm going to go buy somebody's 40-acre farm that's retiring. You don't know what the heck you're doing. That's a big ask for that person to pass their family legacy on to this person that may or may not have the lived experience, and for that person to go into debt and just go full throttle into it. So this is the incubator model, which while it is resource intensive, it's a good bridge, I think, to kind of close that gap between how do we solve the lack of successors and that next generation that isn't growing up on a farm, and kind of making those connections points in the middle. Yeah, I hope I answered all your questions. Yeah.
Thank you, Philip. Next up, Anika, I see you have your hand up.
Hey, yeah, it's Annika.
Annika, I'm sorry.
No worries. So my question is about farming practices at farm incubators. I came from a background where I was a farmer for a long time, and did most of my farming in recent years on a farm incubator in Oregon, which required all of the farmers to use organic practices, but not necessarily become certified. I think the intention was that farmers could become certified if they wanted to be, and that's why they had that rule. But in discussing farm incubator opportunities here in Maryland, I have heard different opinions about that requirement, and equity being the key point of pushback, that requiring organic practices is an inequitable requirement. I guess I'm curious if you have any thoughts about what amount of say these programs should have and how farmers are approaching their practices.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think for us, we chose to become certified organic on our incubator. We've always tried to practice organic practices, mostly because I think a lot of farmers coming to us, that's what they wanted to do. That's why they were getting into farming, was to provide that healthy, pesticide-free, herbicide-free, anti-Monsanto kind of food to their customers, their direct, relational customers. And so people wanted to grow that way. And I think if you have a big enough property, you could probably have a program where people could choose, you don't want to practice organic, you can farm on this side of the property. If you want to practice organic over here. But as people are coming and going with that 3-year waiting period to be able to be certified, you really have to you're either kind of all in or not in some ways, depending on the size of your acreage. Because if you don't want to jeopardize the next person coming in who wants to start their business growing organically, well, then they'd have to wait 3 years. And is the whole time of the incubator 3 years? Like, it just doesn't make sense. So it's kind of one of those things where, from an equity perspective, I understand like forcing people to do a kind of production that they don't want, or to not use all the tools in their toolbox to grow food. I think you would just have to decide from a philosophical point of view, how do you want to manage your property? Do you want to have, a bifurcated system, which then gets very complicated if you wanted to have people do that all over the place? Like, then some people couldn't become certified should they want to. And then if you have to keep everything separate, clean and sanitized between, have your buffer zones, all that stuff, like there's a lot of complications if you wanted to do both. So I think that's why most people just lean toward, you don't have to be certified, but you've got to follow all the practices so that if somebody wants to be certified after you, they're not going to be limited in that way. But yeah, we have a very weedy farm and lots of pests that are hard to control because everybody's growing vegetables all over the place. And it's like, it's not a big enough space to do really good rotation and all that fun stuff.
Thank you. I see next up is Catherine Kuhn. After that, I was hoping that perhaps Christina Bostic from Montgomery Countryside Alliance, not to put you on the spot, but maybe you could give us a brief little, update or thought, and possibly Ellen Gordon from Sugarland Citizens Association at some point next. If you don't mind, not to put you on the spot, but it'd be great to hear about your thoughts or what a little update about what you're all working.
Okay, I have two questions, and they may be parts of the, two parts of the same issue or underlying concept. The first question is, reading through the case studies and just looking at this amazing variance that you have, that is out there. I mean, it seems one thing that really comes out is this difference between incubators that are really targeting immigrant farmers versus other kinds of incubators that are not so targeted. But do you have any analysis of model success or failure based on, is it a peri-urban area? Is it a rural area? That sort of thing. So that's the first question. And the second question is how much the new models, the ag parks, the agrarian commons, the cooperatives, to what extent are they kind of like in the process of just emerging, or have they emerged and are pretty solid? Because it seems like a lot of the issues of transitioning from somebody who's never farmed, sort of, as you said, jumping full-fledged and having to work with part-time jobs and stuff like that could be mitigated by like LLCs where the issue isn't graduating the farmer to their own land. The issue is establishing viable farming structures on pieces of land, in which case the would shift from focus on the person to focus on the land. So you would have groups that your incubator function would be to create a solid farming community on that piece of land, and then it would move to another piece of land. Do you see what I mean?
Yep,
so
absolutely, yeah.
To what extent has that emerged in practice? So those are my questions.
Yeah, no, great questions. I think, starting with the last one first, for sure, I think people are trying to innovate around that. And that's always been kind of the question, like, does the incubator itself move? Like, do you find a group of people and then, okay, now they're getting along, they're learning how to share infrastructure together, and rather than kick them all off and start all over again and try to place each of them individually elsewhere, do you as an organization just keep building more communities of farmers, kind of a la agrarian commons model, ag park model, whatever we want to call it? And there's obviously different legal structures for how those things may function. With the ag park model, like it's happening in Hawaii, it's happening in Washington State, and I think in Florida, some other places. The organization that's running the program is the owning the land, and they're the landlord, and they're just creating these longer term leases for the tenants and providing whatever level of service they're doing, right? So they're just like a landlord and renting farmland with some infrastructure. And the agrarian commons is a little different structure. And I think they're kind of rethinking this now. There's new leadership at agrarian commons, and then the old leadership now has formed the farmland commons. So there's a farmland commons and agrarian commons with agrarian trust, two different entities. But that entity was where agrarian trust as a nonprofit was holding land in the 501c2, and then using lots of community development practices, and then kind of building this commons, recruiting farmers, and then having them hold it in commons long-term leases. I think LLCs could accomplish similar things. So definitely that idea of like forming the community and then moving your resources around is something people are trying to do well. It's also just resource intensive, as you said. Like, again, what are your goals? Are you in the goal of setting up these lots of entities and being a long-term manager of the sites, or are you trying to train people to get them to go out into the world? So it's just kind of a different perspective, I think. And then the audience question, definitely, I think there was a lot of funding at one point from the HHS, Health and Human Services, Refugee Agricultural Partnership Project. So knowing that a lot of refugees and immigrant groups that were coming here already had farming backgrounds, this was a good way of helping connect them to their cultural traditions, their food security needs, their cultural preferences, and a good way to assimilate, help get them into the workforce, or get them jobs and food security and all of that with a skill that they had. So that's partly kind of explains a lot of the refugee resettlement agencies and others who've focused on that audience in more urban and peri-urban areas, I would say, where people are resettled and can get with public transportation or community gardens and graduating into more farming scale things. And then a lot of the incubators are kind of in peri-urban and other areas. I think the rural aspect of incubator is challenging because where are people going to live and where are their markets? And then how do you get a big enough pool of candidates to want to move to a rural community? I think that's always been kind of the rural-urban, peri-urban challenge in this space. So I don't have a good answer for you on that one other than just acknowledging it's harder for rural incubators to get a foothold compared to more urban and peri-urban folks, where people can keep their toe in another job, or spouse can keep a job, and they can drive after work and still have their life and farm and try to slide into that lifestyle over time.
Speaking to my heart, Jennifer. I'm so in. Christina, if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about.
Absolutely. First, I want to thank Jennifer so much for arriving. We've worked together extensively on a more like regional topics about farmer stress and connecting folks with land, and she's doing all of this very, very specifically in her area, and just has, as you guys have all seen, so much experience to bring here. So thank you for coming. What I'd like to give to the conversation is sort of where all of this sort of meets what's already going on in Montgomery County with new and expanding farmers. Montgomery Countryside Alliance is my employer that I've worked with for many years, and we launched in 2011 a land link program that connects new and expanding farmers with land for lease. What Jennifer was saying, folks, buying up that 40-acre property, more often in Montgomery County, it's leases. 60% of land in our agricultural reserve is leased. And that's important to know. In our time, matching farmers, this training piece that would come through an incubator really is the ingredient that's missing. We are finding people that do have that experience. They do have several years of background, but it's just such a holistic career. And you have to do the spreadsheets, and you have to do the marketing, and you have to be just this multi-tool of to be successful. And there are blind spots in every single applicant that comes to us, just because it is such a well-rounded person that you have to be successful. And then the rain doesn't come, or all the rain comes at once. So putting a floor underneath folks of this opportunity is hugely important. I want to speak to the immigrant question as well. While LandLink is not tailored in any way, shape, or form to specifically immigrants, we find that number one, those are the folks that are applying. So many folks are coming from places where agriculture is a lot more a part of their culture than it is here. And then additionally, the people that we have found success through the program often are immigrants, specifically African immigrants, we're finding. Just another point is the sustainability piece, I think, is super important in two different flavors here that Jennifer was talking about. If it hasn't become clear from everyone looking at other things and looking at what Jennifer shared, it's a heavy lift. It's a heavy lift to pull something like this off, and that's why her organization exists to help people through it. And I think the proverb of if you want to go far, go together is really important here. The partnerships that would have to be formed and be very strong to have a first season of an incubator, but subsequent seasons of an incubator as well, would really have to be in place and very strong. This is not something that one organization can take on alone. It's my sense. It's not something two organizations can take on alone. It's going to take a huge coalition, and I think we have it. It's bringing everyone together to hammer things out. And the financial piece really was something that I took from this too, and also from looking at Eco City, which is doing this in PG County. That whole idea of, okay, you can fund and you can grant raise for a season. We want to give folks 3 years at least on these properties. This needs to be a going concern. How do we fundraise in such a way that there is a cushion, there is sustainability going forward? And those are the things that I took from this. LandLink is productive. We have had a lot of matches. We have built those thriving farms of multiple seasons, which is the goal of all of this. But something like an incubator would really supercharge what we're all trying to do here. And I think it's worth going for. Not that it's not easy, but definitely worth striving for.
Thank you, Christina. And for our part, the Food Council is committed to playing our role as a partner, keeping that conversation going. And I know, being mindful of time, we have 1 more minute, hoping that, if everyone have to step off, feel free to do so, but hoping we could stay another minute or two to hear from Ellen about Sugar Land Citizens Association and what their initiative.
Well, we're in the part of the act.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're really quiet, Ellen. Is there anything you can do to?
Does this sound better?
Not really.
I did. I tried it. Not sure what my mic is doing. Can you hear
me? A little bit better now.
I'll lean in. Does that help?
Yes.
What you see behind me is the farm that Sugar Land Citizens Association is an advocacy organization for protecting land in the ag reserve and farming and open space. And about 25, 30 years ago, we ended up with a farm, and it's been in conventional commodities. We are stewarding a portion of it into regenerative grazing, and that leaves additional land still, some of which you can sort of see in the picture behind me, that we're interested seeing go into good soil practices for growing vegetable crops. And one of the ideas we've explored, and we're partnering with people, is an incubator. But we've also, and Jennifer, you illustrated that really well, discovered how complicated that is, which is sort of daunting to our board. But we're still on board with it. We're on board with potentially getting some of this land into farming with more experienced farmers, with maybe an apprenticeship program, definitely sort of a collective cooperative effort. And we're excited about talking to people that are interested in that and learning more about it.
Absolutely. Super exciting. Well, let's see. If there are no more questions, back to you, Esther, well, let me just say one thing. I just want to say really quickly, okay, we do have one more question. Susan, thank you. I was hoping you'd come on. But I just want to say one thing. I am, as you all know, like I would have loved to engage in a farmer incubator program when I was farming for 2 years in Montgomery County. And I'm just really excited about this and hoping that it moves forward. And Susan.
Well, this was fabulous, Jennifer. I hope that we can connect with you. I'm part of the Food Resiliency Working Group, and we've banded together with the Food Council, the Sugarloaf Citizens Association, Countryside Alliance, and the Office of Agriculture is also represented here. Natalia Salazar is a supporter of this as well. And so we're hoping that we will be able to have further conversations with you. And also we have more questions and are curious about, some of the barriers related to our situation in particular, and also some of the stages that we need to go through. We've actually started a document that is kind of an outline of a grant proposal to kind of force us to be able to think through all of the bits and pieces. And so we started that before we looked at the case studies, and now we have the toolkit. And Lorianne was instrumental in introducing us to your organization, and we're really excited about hopefully being able to work with you to put together something where we can really create it and the support for us, because some of our organizations also, frankly, are the ones who, know the supporters, the county executive, the county council, because for us, it would take pushing it through the budget in some kind of support, as well as partnership with foundations and other sources of support funds. So anyway, looking forward to it. And thank you very much.
Yeah, definitely please reach out. Like I said, I'll have 2 more staff members starting in a couple weeks. So once they're up to speed, I'll have more time. And this is what they'll be focused on, is really helping groups across the country develop and, work on their programs and connect to resources. So please keep in touch as you develop your programs.
Well, I just want to say thank you so much for joining us, Jennifer. That was just such a important, list of best practices and considerations for us at this stage. And I just really appreciate that comprehensive approach. And it also, as we were talking about in the chat, it opens this entire conversation about beginning farmer success, which we also should be having at this stage as well. So keeping that conversation going. And I know we're going to continue to talk about this, and as Susan was just saying, make it happen. So great. Esther, over to you to close, if you have any closing remarks.
No, just want to echo what everyone's been saying. Thank you so much, Jennifer, for this wonderful presentation, and we will make sure to share the recording. And yeah, thank you all for being here. All right.
Keep up the great work, you guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Right, bye, everybody.